The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. on a Friday in November. My business partner Marcus Webb had sent the calendar invitation 3 days earlier with the subject line, "Urgent. Partnership restructuring discussion. Not a request. A summons." I arrived at the office at 2:45. Our office, the one I'd been paying rent on since 1991, in a building I'd watched go from new construction to showing its age the same way I'd gone from 43 to 76. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley who'd been hired 8 months ago and who I'd met exactly twice, looked up from her computer and said, "Mr. Webb is expecting you in the main conference room." Mr. Webb, not Marcus, not your partner. Mr. Webb, like I was a client being granted an audience. I nodded and walked down the hallway, past the offices that used to have my name on the directory before the rebranding Marcus had initiated last spring. Past the break room where I'd eaten lunch alone for the past 2 years because the new staff didn't know who I was and the old staff had all retired or been pushed out. The conference room door was open. Marcus was standing at the head of the table in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check, talking on his phone. When he saw me, he held up one finger, the universal gesture for "I'm too important to acknowledge you properly, but I see you're here." I sat down. Not at the head of the table where I used to sit. In the middle. In the seat that made it clear this was his meeting, his territory, his terms. Marcus finished his call and set his phone face down on the table with the deliberate precision of a man who'd been taught that controlling small gestures communicates control over everything else. "Donald," he said, sitting down across from me. "Thanks for coming in. Thanks for coming in. To the company I'd founded 34 years ago. To the office I'd been paying for before he was born. You said it was urgent," I said. "It is." He slid a folder across the table. "I'll be direct. The company is at a crossroads. We can either modernize and grow or we can stagnate and die. I've been carrying us for the last 5 years while you've been checked out." I didn't react. I'd learned in 7 decades that the person who reacts first loses the negotiation. "I've brought in new clients," Marcus continued. "I've updated our technology. I've built relationships with vendors who actually matter in today's market. Meanwhile, you show up twice a week, sit in your office, and collect a partner's share of profits you haven't earned." He opened the folder. Inside were documents. Legal documents. I could see the header on the first page. Voluntary Partnership Dissolution and Equity Transfer Agreement. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, and his voice had the casual certainty of someone who'd already decided the outcome and was just narrating the formality. "You're going to sign this agreement. It dissolves our partnership. You'll receive $75,000 as a buyout, which is generous considering your actual contribution to current revenue, and you'll transfer your 50% equity to me. Clean break. You can retire with dignity." He pushed the papers toward me. He put a pen on top of them. Then he leaned back in his chair and said the words I'd been waiting 3 days to hear. "Sign the papers, old man." I looked at him, at his expensive suit, at his confident posture, at the expression on his face that said he'd already won and this was just the part where I accepted it. Then I smiled. Not a bitter smile. Not a defeated smile. The smile of a man who'd spent 3 days preparing for exactly this moment and who was about to enjoy what came next more than he'd enjoyed anything in 5 years. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a different folder, the thicker folder, and I slid it across the table. "Before I sign anything," I said calmly, "I think you should look at this." Marcus's expression flickered, just for a second, confusion replaced by annoyance. "What is this?" he asked. "Open it and find out." He opened it. I watched his face as he read the first page, then the second, then the third. I watched the color drain from his skin. I watched his jaw tighten. I watched him realize that the meeting he'd planned so carefully had just become something else entirely. "Where did you get this?" he said quietly. "I've been collecting it for 18 months, I said. "Every bank statement, every invoice, every transfer, every single piece of evidence showing that you've been systematically stealing from this company since 2019. I leaned forward. "Now," I said, Let's talk about who's signing what. Welcome to Family Reckoning. I'm grateful you're here for this one. Before we go any further, drop your state or country in the comments so I know where this story is reaching. Also, a quick note. This story contains fictionalized elements for dramatic and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or events is coincidental. But the lesson I'm about to share? That's universal. Let's begin. I started Carlisle Business Solutions in 1990 with $18,000 I'd saved working as an accountant for a regional manufacturing firm. The business was simple. I helped small companies manage their books, their taxes, their payroll. Nothing glamorous, nothing revolutionary, just solid, reliable service for people who needed it and couldn't afford the big firms. For 15 years, it was just me. An office, computer, a phone. I worked 60-hour weeks. I built a client base. By 2005, I was doing well enough to hire my first employee, a bookkeeper named Sandra who stayed with me for 8 years before retiring. By 2010, I had 4 employees and was thinking about expanding. That's when I met Marcus Webb. He was 28 years old, sharp, charismatic, a business degree from UNC and 2 years of experience at a consulting firm in Charlotte. He'd applied for a senior accountant position I'd posted, and when I interviewed him, I was impressed. He understood the industry. He spoke confidently about growth strategies, about technology, about positioning the company for the next decade. He had ideas I didn't have and energy I didn't have anymore at 63. I hired him. Within a year, I made him a junior partner. 10% equity in exchange for helping me grow the business and eventually taking over operations when I was ready to step back. It worked. For a while, it really worked. Marcus brought in new clients, big clients, a regional hospital system, a chain of automotive dealerships, companies that needed sophisticated financial services and were willing to pay for them. Revenue doubled between 2011 and 2014. We moved to a bigger office. We hired more staff. I was making more money than I'd ever made, and Marcus was the reason. In 2015, I restructured the partnership. I gave Marcus 50% equity, equal partners, equal profit sharing, equal say in company decisions. You've earned this, I told him the day we signed the paperwork. You've built this as much as I have. Marcus shook my hand. We're going to do great things together, Donald. I believed him. My wife Ruth had died in 2012. Cancer. We'd been married 41 years. After she died, the business became the thing that kept me going. The thing that gave me a reason to get up in the morning. Marcus knew that. I told him. In one of those late-night conversations you have when you're working overtime on a difficult client and the barriers come down and you say things you normally wouldn't. This company is all I have left, I'd said. Ruth and I never had kids. This is my legacy, the thing I built. Marcus had nodded sympathetically. I understand, and I'll make sure it lasts. I thought he meant he'd protect it. I didn't realize he meant he'd take it. The theft started small. Small enough that I didn't notice it at first. In 2019, Marcus suggested we upgrade our accounting software. The system we're using is outdated, he said. There's a new platform that integrates everything: billing, payroll, client management. It'll save us time and money. I trusted him. He understood technology better than I did. We made the switch. What I didn't know was that the new platform gave Marcus administrative access I didn't have. He could create invoices, process payments, transfer funds, all without a second signature or oversight. The first transfers were small. $500 here, $800 there. Amounts small enough to disappear into the normal flow of business expenses. Office supplies, software subscriptions, professional development. By 2020, the amounts got larger. $2,000, $5,000. Always labeled as legitimate business expenses. Always with invoices attached. Invoices I later learned were fabricated. Marcus created shell companies. MW Consulting Services. Webb Solutions Group. Strategic Business Partners, LLC. They existed only on paper, with addresses that were mail drops and phone numbers that went to voicemail. He'd create invoices from these fake companies for services that were never provided. Consulting fees, marketing services, technology upgrades. Then he'd approve the payments himself and transfer the money to accounts he controlled. Between 2019 and 2023, Marcus stole $340,000 from the company, from our company, from me. I didn't discover it until 18 months ago, and I didn't discover it by accident. Comment still here if you're locked in. This gets deeper. The discovery happened on a Tuesday morning in June, 18 months ago. I was in the office early, something I'd been doing less frequently because Marcus had made it clear, subtly but unmistakably, that my presence wasn't really necessary anymore. "You've earned the right to take it easy, Donald," he'd say. "Let me handle the day-to-day." But that Tuesday I couldn't sleep. Ruth's birthday. She would have been 78. I'd woken up at 4 a.m. thinking about her, about the life we'd built, about the fact that I was 75 years old and the only thing I had left from that life was this company. I went to the office, made coffee, sat at my desk and opened the accounting software, not to work, just to feel like I was doing something purposeful. I was scrolling through recent transactions when I noticed something odd. An invoice for technology consulting services from a company called Strategic Business Partners, LLC. $8,500. Approved by Marcus. Paid 2 weeks earlier. I didn't recognize the company name. That wasn't unusual. Marcus handled vendor relationships. But something about it bothered me. I Googled the company. Nothing came up. No website. No business listing. No LinkedIn page. I searched our email for correspondence with them. Nothing. I checked the invoice more carefully. The address listed was a UPS store in Durham. The phone number went to a generic voicemail that didn't identify the company. I sat back in my chair. Maybe it was legitimate. Maybe it was a new vendor Marcus was testing. Maybe I was being paranoid. But I'd been doing accounting for 50 years. And my gut told me something was wrong. I spent the next 6 hours going through every transaction Marcus had approved in the past year. I found 4 more invoices from Strategic Business Partners, 3 from MW Consulting Services, 2 from Webb Solutions Group, all of them for amounts between $3,000 and $10,000, all approved by Marcus, all paid to addresses that were mail drops or virtual offices. I called our bank. I explained I was verifying some transactions and needed to confirm where the payments had been deposited. The bank couldn't give me account holder information without a subpoena, but they could tell me the payments had been deposited to accounts at different banks. Not business accounts, but personal accounts. I hired a private investigator, a retired forensic accountant named Bill Mercer who I'd known professionally for 20 years. I gave him access to everything: bank statements, invoices, transaction records. "Find out where the money went," I said. Took Bill 3 weeks. When he came back, he had a folder 3 inches thick. "Donald," he said, sitting across from me in my office, "Marcus has been stealing from you since at least 2019, probably longer, but that's as far back as I can document with certainty." He walked me through it. The shell companies, the fake invoices, the transfers to personal accounts Marcus controlled. The total amount, $340,000 over 4 years. "What do I do?" I asked. "You call the police," Bill said. "This is embezzlement. Fraud. He'll go to prison." I thought about that, about Marcus in prison, about the company collapsing during a criminal investigation, about my legacy ending in a scandal. "What if I don't want to call the police?" I said. Bill looked at me carefully. "Then you use the evidence as leverage. You make him give back what he stole. And you get him out of your company." "How?" "You wait. You keep collecting evidence. You let him think he's getting away with it. And when he makes his move, because men like Marcus always make a move, you show him what you have and give him a choice. Pay back every dollar, sign over his equity, and walk away quietly, or you take everything to the district attorney." I looked at the folder, at 18 months of theft documented in bank statements and invoices and transfers. "How long do I wait?" I asked. "Until he overplays his hand," Bill said. "Men like Marcus always do. Bill was right. 18 months later, Marcus called the meeting where he planned to force me out with a $75,000 buyout. He'd overplayed his hand. Marcus stared at the folder I'd slid across the table. His face had gone from confident to pale to something harder to read. Calculating. Looking for an exit. "This doesn't prove anything," he said finally. "These are legitimate business expenses. MW Consulting Services," I said calmly. "Registered to an address in Durham. The same address as your personal LLC that you use for side income. Strategic Business Partners. Bank account opened in your name in 2019, 3 weeks before the first invoice was issued." I pulled out another document. "Here's an affidavit from a forensic accountant confirming that these companies exist only on paper, that no services were ever provided, and that all funds were transferred to accounts you control." Marcus said nothing. "You've stolen $340,000 from this company over the last 4 years. I continued. "That's embezzlement. Wire fraud. In North Carolina, that's a Class H felony. You're looking at 25 months in prison. Minimum." "You can't prove intent," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I can prove you created fake companies. I can prove you issued false invoices. I can prove you transferred company funds to personal accounts. A prosecutor doesn't need much more than that." I closed the folder. "But here's what I'm going to offer you. One time. One chance. You're going to sign a document I've had prepared by my attorney. It does 4 things. I counted them on my fingers. 1, you admit to the theft. Not in criminal terms. In a civil settlement that keeps this out of court. 2, you agree to repay every dollar you stole. $340,000, plus interest. You'll have 5 years with monthly payments of $6,500. If you miss a payment, the full amount becomes due immediately, and I take this folder to the district attorney." Marcus was gripping the edge of the table. 3, you transfer your 50% equity in Carlisle Business Solutions to me. Immediately. No buyout. No compensation. You walk away with nothing. And 4, Marcus asked through clenched teeth. 4, you resign. Effective immediately. You leave this building today and you never contact our clients, our employees, or anyone associated with this company again. You sign a non-compete that bars you from working in this industry in North Carolina for 5 years. I leaned back in my chair. You do all of that and this folder stays between us. You don't go to prison. You don't get a criminal record. You just spend the next 5 years paying back what you stole and rebuilding your life somewhere else." Marcus looked at the folder, then at me, then back at the folder. "You're bluffing," he said. "You won't go to the police. You need me. This company runs on the clients I brought in." "The clients you brought in have contracts with Carlisle Business Solutions," I said. "Not with you. I've already spoken to our 3 largest clients. I explained that you were leaving and that I'd be personally overseeing their accounts going forward. They were fine with it. In fact, one of them mentioned they'd always felt more comfortable working with me anyway. That was a lie. I hadn't spoken to the clients yet. But Marcus didn't know that. "You have until 5 p.m. today to decide," I said. "Sign the settlement agreement, or I take this to the district attorney Monday morning." I stood up. I picked up my briefcase. I walked to the door. "Donald," Marcus said. His voice was different now. Smaller. "We can work this out. We can figure out a compromise." I turned back. "The compromise is that you're not going to prison, Marcus. That's the only one you're getting." I left the conference room. I walked to my office, the small one in the back that I'd been relegated to when Marcus decided the corner office should be his. I sat down. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the specific satisfaction of watching a man who'd underestimated me realize he'd made a critical mistake. At 4:37 p.m., there was a knock on my door. Marcus walked in. He was holding the settlement agreement I'd left in the conference room. He'd signed every page. "Drop 100 points if you're still locked in. The resolution gets better." Marcus transferred his equity the following Monday. My attorney had prepared the paperwork in advance. We'd been ready for this moment for 3 weeks. Ever since Marcus sent the meeting invitation that Bill Mercer said would be his move. The transfer was filed with the Secretary of State. By Wednesday, I was the sole owner of Carlisle Business Solutions. Marcus cleaned out his office on Tuesday morning. I watched from my window as he carried boxes to his car, the Mercedes he'd bought with money he'd stolen from the company. He didn't look up, didn't say goodbye to anyone, just loaded his car and drove away. The staff was confused. Ashley, the receptionist, asked me what happened. Marcus decided to pursue other opportunities. I said, I'll be taking over his responsibilities. It was the truth, technically. The first payment of $6,500 arrived on the 15th of the following month. Bank transfer, exactly as specified in the settlement agreement. It's arrived on the 15th of every month since then. Marcus has never missed a payment. I don't know what he's doing now. I don't care. He's alive, he's not in prison, and he's slowly paying back what he stole. That's all that matters. The company is doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I hired a new senior accountant, a woman in her 40s named Patricia who's competent and honest and doesn't treat me like a relic. I come to the office 4 days a week now. Not because I have to, because I want to, because this is my company again. My name is back on the directory. My desk is back in the corner office. I'm 77 now. I'll probably work another 3 years, maybe 5. Then I'll sell the company to someone who'll take care of it. Someone who understands that a business isn't just assets and revenue. It's the accumulation of decades of work and trust and the belief that what you're building matters. Last month, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. Mr. Carlisle? A young voice, male, nervous. Speaking. My name is Jason Torres. I worked for Marcus Webb at his new company for about 8 months. I just quit. And I think you should know. He's doing the same thing to his new partner that he did to you. I sat down. What do you mean? Fake invoices. Shell companies. I saw the pattern because I was helping with bookkeeping. His partner is older, doesn't really understand technology, trusts Marcus to handle everything. I tried to tell him, but he didn't believe me, so I quit. Why are you calling me? I asked. Because when I was cleaning out my desk, I found an old email thread. Marcus was talking to someone about you, about how he'd finally gotten rid of the dead weight, about how you were too senile to realize what was happening until it was too late. Jason paused. I Googled you. I found out you're still running the company, that Marcus doesn't work there anymore. And I thought, maybe you'd want to know he's doing it again. I asked Jason for the partner's name and contact information. He gave it to me. I called the partner that afternoon. A man named Robert Chen, 68 years old, running a small consulting firm in Raleigh. Mr. Chen, I said, you don't know me, but I used to be in business with Marcus Webb, and I think we need to talk. I told him everything. About the theft, about the shell companies, about the settlement agreement that Marcus was currently paying off. Robert was silent for a long time. Then, how do I prove it? You hire a forensic accountant, I said. I can recommend one. His name is Bill Mercer. Tell him I sent you. Robert called me back 2 weeks later. You were right. Marcus has stolen $47,000 in the last 6 months. I'm meeting with an attorney tomorrow. Good, I said. Make him pay it back. All of it. And get him out of your company. I will. Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. You're welcome. I don't know what happened after that. I didn't follow up. It wasn't my business anymore. But I hope Robert took every dollar back. I hope Marcus is now making 2 sets of monthly payments, one to me, one to Robert. I hope he wakes up every morning for the next 5 years and remembers that stealing from people who trust you has consequences. Not always. Not for everyone. But sometimes, if you're patient and careful and you document everything, the person who underestimated you because of your age or your kindness or your apparent willingness to step aside, that person learns that being underestimated is the most powerful position you can occupy, because they never see you coming. If this story reached you, I need to hear from you. Leave a comment. Tell me about a time someone underestimated you. Tell me how you proved them wrong. Here's what I learned at 77. 1. Never let someone rush you into signing documents. Read everything. Understand everything. If you don't understand, hire someone who does. 2. Trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired, but it can be converted into leverage if you're patient and methodical. 3. Age is not weakness. Experience is not obsolescence. The person who's been doing this for 50 years knows things the person who's been doing it for 5 will never understand. 4. Document everything. Every transaction. Every conversation. Every promise. The person with the best records wins. 5. When someone calls you old man like it's an insult, smile, because they've just told you they've underestimated you. And that's when you've already won. 6. Justice doesn't always mean prison. Sometimes it means making someone spend 5 years paying back every dollar they stole while you continue running the company they thought they'd taken from you. These stories aren't easy to tell, but I tell them because somewhere out there is someone being pushed aside, being told they're too old, too slow, too trusting, being pressured to sign papers they don't understand by someone who's counting on them not to fight back. Fight back, quietly, methodically, with documentation and patience and the understanding that the person rushing you is rushing you because they're afraid you'll figure out what they're really doing. You can figure it out. You can stop it. You can take back what's yours. I did it at 76. You can do it at any age. If this reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Family Reckoning so you never miss a story like this. Comment below. Tell me what you're protecting. Tell me who underestimated you and how you're proving them wrong. Thank you for staying to the end. It means everything. One final note. Some elements of this story are fictionalized for narrative and educational purposes. If that's not your style, I understand. But the core truth that you can be underestimated, stolen from, and still take back everything that's yours, that's real. That's always real.